Okay, hello everyone and welcome to the second of the South Devon Rivers webinar series. We've again got a whole different mixture of people once again, so just to go through it, we are Citizen, which stands for the Coastal Intertidal Zone Archaeological Network. We're mainly about coastal intertidal zone archaeology. Today we're going to hear from a fantastic new project in its infancy, another community project based around the Exe River, which of course is within our South Devon Rivers Discovery Programme. We're hoping to work with them to provide some of the archaeological knowledge, and I am going to hand over to them, and we're going to hand over to Anne-Marie Culhane Jo Salter. There'll be 15 minutes of presentation from them and then 15 minutes of questions. Okay.
Great. Hello, everybody. And yeah, we're going to talk for a little while about Tidelines and introduce it. It's quite a new project, and we're really excited to be here today. Thanks, Citizen and Grant, for inviting us. And just by way of introduction, my name is Anne-Marie Culhane. I live in Exmouth in Devon, so on the Exe estuary. I've lived here for 5 years, and I am a project manager, an artist that works with communities in all sorts of different ways, mostly bringing people together in live events, and they can range from performance to feast to meals to discussions to dialogue sessions, all sorts of different ways of bringing people together.
Okay, I'm Jo Salter, also resident in Exmouth, also co-coordinator of Tidelines. I'm a graphic designer, an artist with experience of gallery curation, education and social engagement.
So this first slide just kind of, I guess, hammers home what we're talking about, which is that our project is all about participation, and that final line, involve me and I will understand, is really important to us. So we're trying for the whole process of Tidelines to be about involving people, bringing local expertise, bringing members of the community of all ages together with the academic world, with knowledge from the academic world, in order to act and respond appropriately and with care to the challenges that we're facing now and in the future in our estuary. So those challenges, I probably don't need to say them, but are climate change and all of the things that go around that, around the changes in the chemistry and biology of the oceans, biodiversity loss and species loss. So how, as a community, can we respond to those challenges with care, with sensitivity, and with a sort of a collective knowledge and learning? So I guess there's research, there's action, there's creativity and participation at the core. So this is our estuary, the red bit in the middle, which probably a lot of you recognise. I'm not sure where you're all from, but this is our Exe estuary, with the left with the River Clyst and the River Exe coming in, and Topsham and the bottom left, and then opening out to the mouth to the English Channel. And we are seeing this red space in the middle as our focal point. We're estuarine people. We're gathering people from both sides of the estuary in our project and making connections across the water. What's seen as a divide in the rail system, it takes about an hour to get from one side to the other. On a kayak, it takes about 10 minutes. So we're trying to sort of, I guess, open up those lines of communication that might have been there in the past across and around the estuary. And our whole project starts with 3 questions.
And I'll just read them out. These are the 3 questions. What do we want to know about our changing estuary and coast in the past, the present and the future? How can we celebrate and learn more about the Exe estuary, which is our shared home? And how can we be active in responding to our communities and as individuals to the environment and the climate crisis? So those are the main questions we're asking ourselves and the community. So
how, at the moment, we've got a little bit of funding from Exeter University as part of an Erasmus, which is a European funded project. So there's partners in other European cities. And it's a pilot project to explore how the university can work better with communities to share knowledge, to enact its role as a civic university, where the research becomes much more part of the learning of the people that live around the university and feeds into feed much more actively into the research. So there's a 2-way flow of knowledge, we're hoping, will emerge from this process. It's quite I think quite an unique experimental project. We're also working with the Global Systems Institute, and I think on this call today we've got Dr. Tom Powell, who's one of our long-term collaborators, who is an impact research fellow at the Global Systems Institute. So we're taking a very broad systems-based view of the estuary, looking from lots of different disciplines and lots of different angles. We've also got a little bit of funding from long name Southwest Creative Technology Network, which is a consortium of different universities and arts organisations in the Southwest. So the Tidelines space, what kind of space are we creating for people? Well, we're really delighted to be working with Citizen on the South Rivers Discovery Programme. We're hoping to work in partnership as much as possible with different organisations. So Citizen's looking at intertidal heritage and coast, and I guess highlighting how fast that's changing because of the changes around climate change and sea level rise and erosion speeding up. And we are looking in Tidelines all the time at stories. So we're creating a space for stories. I guess we're hoping to write a new story with the people that get involved in our project, a new story of the river, a new story of the estuary. It's not a new story that will come from nowhere. It's a story that draws on the past. So all of us as artists, as archaeologists, as historians, probably in most disciplines, there's an element of story and an element of noticing and looking at things carefully. And that's when we learn, and that's when we can start to understand the past and how the past shapes the present, and ultimately how that will shape our future. So I guess thinking of the archaeological and the historical frame, we're really excited to sort of get down in the estuary, in the mud, with people at Citizen, and just see what's revealed there about our relationship to the estuary in the past and what we can learn from that. So we would love you to get involved with us. If you're really interested in the past, we think that really informs the present and the future. It's not separate, it's part of one continuum of time. So yeah, everything is story, and stories speak about our place.
Okay, we've got a variety of different engagement events planned, most intended to be face-to-face, which is obviously not as possible as it was. So we've created 5 activities that can be done online safely just now. And an example of this is Mapping the X, in which people in the community and around the estuary are invited to, and beyond, are invited to submit a map relating to the estuary in any form. This one you're looking at is not one of those. This is 1757 image of the estuary. Yeah, move on. Yeah, maps basically are subjective, and so tell us more about how the place is perceived by those that made the maps, i.e., you know, how does a dog remember its walk? You know, there are so many different ways of seeing. So it's a very useful way of finding out how people see the estuary in all their variety. So people have started sending in maps now. We've only started a while ago. We've had a fantastic variety. This one is from, you can see it's a fairly idiosyncratic version of the estuary, much loved, lots of, I know the person spent a lot of time here, but he's not from here. He studied in Falmouth and has chosen to select is what people have selected to show that's really interesting. This one is again somebody who obviously has a passion for the estuary and has chosen to highlight a few things. One of the things I wanted to highlight in this is that it has a series of channel markers which contain, which have names, which have, and the names, as I'm sure you're aware, are historically go back a very long way and therefore contain the history of them. And this map was written to some extent in response to somebody attempting to take the names out and put numbers instead. So if they had done that, you wouldn't have Ting Tong, which is the second one from the top, which is a Viking name, or Black Ore Bank, which is where people would park up before they went up towards Exeter in their boats, so they'd leave their boats there. So it's really it's important to keep these names. You want to move on? Okay, and here's another example. I don't want to go on and on. This is just one of the 5 projects that people are contributing to. This one is given to us by a secondary school student who's made it using pyrography and has responded to the fact that the piece of wood looks like the flow of the estuary with the dark parts in the middle and the flow. So I'm really very fond of that, and it's fantastic effort. Yeah.
So in a sense, the 5 activities that we've got at the moment, because we started that during the lockdown, are very much geared around people being able to participate from home in activities like creating a map of the estuary, asking questions of things they've always wanted to know about the estuary that we can then try and find out from all the network of contacts and the academics that we know and the people that have the local knowledge. So there's an activity to ask questions, things you're curious about. There's a mapping exercise. There's also an activity called Letter to the Sea, which is more about looking at the ocean and looking at the estuary in terms of, I guess, the more intangible personal relationship that most of the people in the estuary have with the ebb and flow of the tides and the water. I mean, some of us have chosen to live here, some people are born and bred here. So what is that relationship to the sea? How do we articulate that? So there's quite an open opportunity there for people to write a letter to the sea. It can be anonymous, it can be named, and we're sharing those on the website. We've also got an activity where people are using their phones to photograph different parts of the estuary. And what's the last one?
Almanac.
The almanac, very important, the Tidelines Community Almanac. So what we're trying to support as we go on, we want to be here for as long as we can doing this project, is building up a community diary of things that people notice and see around the estuary and coast. So when new islands appear off the beach, when people spot a seal, what is the day of the year when we notice that barrel jellyfish are first arriving? What's the day when we notice that a whole load of kelp has washed up on the sea? So we're trying to invite people into just sending us short diary entries of things that they notice, and to get this sense that the community is becoming more aware and alert to the changes that are happening over time. And we think this will also provide actually quite useful data over time. So this is just a quick summary of what we're doing, and then we'll open up to questions from you. So this year, because of the restrictions in place, we're not doing so many live events, but we are doing the 5 activities, and we're also making those 5 activities available to people in a kind of pack that we can send to people in their homes. We're aware that this online thing is not working out for everybody, and a lot of people don't have access or don't want to spend time online, or may not want to use our website. So we've got another way for people to get involved. We can send them out a kit which enables them to do those 5 activities at home. We're establishing a network of participants through these activities. And then the kind of events that we can do and the kind of ways that we can start to raise knowledge and awareness of the estuary in the community and kind of up the literacy around the estuary are through the Tidelines blog, where people can come and do guest blogs, so they can do guest little bits of writing about why they're interested in the estuary, what their specialist knowledge is, what they're curious about. And that will just be people that get in contact with us and want to write something. And we're also doing an event in July around sea temperature change. So at this time of year, loads of people are in the water. Lots of people are noticing how warm the sea is. Okay, so we're going to have a session talking to 2 researchers about sea temperature change and the impacts for us in our estuary locally and on the marine biology here, but also globally. What kind of stories does that tell us about what's happening in our ecosystems? One other activity we're doing, which you might be interested in, is that we're going to have a mass reading of a book called The Sea Around Us by Rachel Carson. And she wrote that book in 1951. It's a beautiful, sparkling piece of writing which mixes science with poetry and talks about the ocean system. And when we share back our experience of reading that over the summer, so we can send you a copy of that book if you want to read. And then when we share back in the early autumn, we will have that sharing back will be supported either online or in live events by a scientist and other people that can answer some questions that come up through that. So we're developing these new connections, we're developing our community, and we're running a couple of events this summer. And longer term, we want to work with researchers, as we said, in the universities to help us to learn more about what's happening here and the change. It could be citizen science projects. It could be that we start monitoring certain things that people are interested in. It could be monitoring the salinity, the sea temperature, depending on what people's interests are. We're going to have exhibitions and public events. We need to get some funding bits together. So if you know anything about funding, please get in touch with us. And we're going to keep interpreting what we find creatively. In the estuary, there's very little interpretation. There's some fantastic resources online, and particularly the Estuary Partnership have a fantastic online database and documents about all different aspects of the estuary. But we want to take that out in amongst the community and make that more accessible. So that's us really, a unique research hub that cares for, adapts to and responds to living here and the people and the more than humans that share this place with us. Thanks very much. Probably back to Grant now.
Yeah.
Should you all be able to see me? Oh, fantastic, that was great. I love the idea of, so it's something that's been happening in Citizen a lot as well, as the idea of using archaeology as a storytelling mechanism as well. So we do fair bits with that. And yeah, it looks like we could be on, once we're all allowed out of our houses, we should be on to some really nice stuff. So just before we go into the questions, we're going to be joined by Tom Powell, who has logged in. So if you just open up your webcam, Tom. Just to introduce the next talk in 2 weeks' time. So on the 9th of July, we'll be hearing from Dr. Niall Finneran over at University of Winchester, and he's going to be talking to us about the heritage of seaside towns on the Devon coastline, with particular focus around Teignmouth. So anyway, on to questions. So first, I suppose the first question, which is personally from me, is how do people get involved with Tidelines? I'll go towards Anne. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear us? Yeah.
Yep.
So basically, there's a few kind of places there online on that slide. Can you still see that? I think you can. The website, go and explore the website if you can. If you can bear to go online, again, maybe not today, you want to get outside, but tidelines.uk. It's designed to be as accessible and friendly as possible. So have a quick look around, and then we would love you to be involved actively. That's what we really want. I think our project kind of will falter. It needs people. It needs people to be actively engaged. That's what gives it life. So there's a place to sign up at the bottom of the first page. So that's possibly the first thing to do. The sign up will just mean you'll get updates regularly. And then the 5 activities, have a look at them. There might just be one that's of interest. Maybe you could do one with your family, other family members. You might do one, might want to start doing the almanac. You can send the almanac, which is the diary keeping. You can just text us diary entries for that. So you might just be out walking, notice something, text us, and then we can put that in the almanac. So those 5 activities are kind of giving us a starting point, and that's what everything else will really spring from. Yeah, so that's how to get involved.
And you might want a kit.
Yes, and if you don't want to go online at all, then just go online enough to send us an email, and if you give us your address, we can send you one of the kits. They should be ready by the middle of July, so we can send you a kit.
Yeah, I will admit it's hard to stay online when the weather is this good in Devon. Okay, so Tom, if you just quickly introduce yourself, and then I have a question for you as well, which is how is the university involved in the Tidelines project?
Sure. Yeah, so Anne-Marie already introduced me a little bit. I'm Tom Powell, Research Impact Fellow at the Global Systems Institute at the university. How are we involved? Well, I've collaborated with Anne-Marie and Jo over several years on different projects. And the question, I suppose the question we're interested in as the Global Systems Institute is how do we create a flourishing and safe future for humanity as part of a healthy and diverse Earth system? That's quite a big question. But we're absolutely, completely aware that that's not a research question on its own. That's a question about how you activate people and communities to care for and be responsible for and to integrate them with the natural systems that they rely on. And so we're really fascinated by partnering with communities all over the world. So I work with communities across Africa as well as locally in the UK on these questions of how you sustainably interact with local ecosystems and adapt to their changes with climate change.
Okay. That brings me on to quite a nice question from the group, which leads on. Put your hand up who wants to answer this one, but do you plan on expanding the project or the theme of the project into other areas, not just the X? If you're able to sustain yourselves. We're talking big picture, big dream pictures.
Well, really quickly from us, we would really like to connect with other estuaries. At the moment, it's just the Tidelines community in terms of workload is mostly Joe and I on a very part-time basis. So once we're on more solid ground, which we hope to be later in the year or next year, then we'll have more capacity, because I think there's some really interesting conversations that could happen across estuaries and learning and exchange, particularly internationally, but also nationally. I mean, you know, some of these challenges are really real in terms of, for example, in Exmouth, there is housing at risk, there is flood issues, but there are also challenges around invasive species due to climate change in our estuaries. So some of the learning that we're getting as a community around those and how we're managing to engage people, yes, that could be really useful to share. So we'd love to find out also if there are other projects that can share stuff with us.
Yeah, so I can share a few projects overview. Ourselves, the South Devon Rivers Discovery Programme goes all the way from Sidmouth down to Wembury, and our main work is around the X, the Teen and the Dart. But obviously we have a lot more archaeological focus and climate change focus than general. The next questions, so how long are you funded for? And what are the ways in which people can contribute to you at the moment?
But contribute financially.
Sorry.
Will come up in a minute.
So our funding at the moment runs till spring next year, and so we're already looking for our next sources of funding, and we're also exploring with Exeter University being partners in different bids that come up around citizen science and public engagement. So I guess we're multidisciplinary, so that can be quite helpful because we can frame the work in different ways. So yes, if anyone's got any ideas around funding sources as well, please get in touch.
Yeah. Well, I think it's lovely. I mean, every academic or people working have a different opinion have a different view and perspective. As you say, with mapping is completely subjective. I tend to go towards stuff from a boating point of view and more practical ways of doing stuff, whereas I've known artists go from a completely opposite spectrum to myself. Which brings me on to, if you had to create a creative map, what would be the kind of main focus of the X estuary for you? What's the story you like to talk about when it comes to the X?
I don't think I've got any particular single way. We're on a table at the moment. Underneath this computer is actually a physical model of the X. It's this long, and it's in the water park. I don't know, I think I'm interested in the flow and as a sailor, I guess. So I'm interested in the channels. I don't know. I would see it from that point of view, perhaps. Yeah.
So I think I'm really interested in how other creatures who live here see the X estuary. So a lot of the life in the estuary is under the ground, hidden, perhaps not kind of landmark, you know, beautiful species that we all love. They're more things people go when they see. So how do we get some sense of what these changes might mean to those creatures and what's their experience of the estuary? These are all quite far out questions. There are people that are trying to look at this. How does that sort of ecosystem piece together from these different perspectives of non-humans who were probably here before we were here and probably will be here when we're gone? So I'm curious about their experience of the estuary. So probably play with
Okay.
that idea.
That's quite a nice idea. So Tom, same question. What about the X? Where would you focus? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I apologise, but where would your research interests go?
I think my interest would be to understand, to see, so the way that we see life in Earth system science is that living things are sort of ephemeral structures made of flowing together of carbon, nitrogen, nutrients, energy. So I'd like to map the estuary system as flows of energy and molecules that come together in life structures, but then also dissipate and are exchanged between living things. And the evolution of that over time would be a wonderful picture, I think.
Okay, amazing. That sounds way out of my skill set. I just look at the old stuff. But that takes into another one, which is where it's more in my area of stuff. But are you planning to include more archaeology and personal history stories into your project? I suppose this is something we've been both working on, and yeah, kind of involvement between Citizen and Anne-Marie in getting those stories and talking about them, essentially getting platforms to do that. But Anne-Marie, take over. I'm sure you're working with other people on this one as well.
Yeah, I mean, a key point of Tidelines is the local knowledge. Whenever I've worked with Tom before on projects with academics, we try and a space where all forms of knowledge are really welcome and supported and equalised. So we did a 2-day walk along the south coast of Devon with 3 members of the Earth System Science team, including Tim Lenton, who's a climate change professor. At the beginning of that walk, it was very clear that the walk was about sharing forms of knowledge and story, and it wasn't about hierarchy. It was about trying to honour what everyone else can do. So yes, it's a long way around saying that those stories that people have and that knowledge that people have here is absolutely invaluable to how we learn and adapt going forward to changes. If you just speak to the guy who drives the Stuart Line cruise boat, he knows intimately how deep the water is, how the sandbanks have changed from year to year. He can tell you more than probably most other people about how this estuary works from that particular perspective. So imagine if we can draw those perspectives together, we're going to get an incredibly rich set of stories and information that we can act on and use.
Okay, cool. And I think that brings us on to, I think you've kind of gone over it, but what makes Tidelines different to every other community project out there?
You can go for it. Okay, I'll go for it. So I think what makes it different is that we are really trying to expand beyond the normal boundaries and silos, or I guess discipline sets, and say, actually, if you're a historian and archaeologist, your work's really relevant to an artist. If you're an artist, the way that you see the world might be really relevant to a biologist. Or we're trying to really mix up across disciplines and have a systemic look at what's here. I mean, maybe Tom could answer that also from what's unique about Tidelines from an academic science perspective.
Yeah, I think Tidelines is trying to force us as a research institution to restructure ourselves to acknowledge local knowledge and expertise. So for us, this is not just about reaching out to communities. This is about how do we reshape.
Sorry, Tom, I think you're cutting out a little bit. You might have to wait a couple of seconds, then start talking again. Or is that my internet?
I'm caught up now. Yeah, so this is, for us, this is about how we reshape ourselves to respond to the needs of communities.
I think it's different. One of the main things, I mean, it's different in a number of ways, but for me, it's the democratic way in which it's framed, in that the community is the generator of it's an equal partner in any dialogue, and the component in the project is to co-design research questions which will emanate and come from the curiosity of the community itself. and will lead to active research. And I think that's quite unusual, that we are actually asking people to not just get involved or be collectors of data. They're actually there to share in the whole process of research right from the start.
Okay, I did miss the first part of that, but I'm going to presume there were fantastic answers. I'm just going to have to presume this one, because I think my internet is it's getting a bit flaky, sadly. So I suppose, last question, just in case my internet does drop out in its entirety. How can people help you? How can people help you now? I love this idea of the mapping project, because I've seen a few of your maps on your websites. It's incredible to see what other people's perspective of an estuary is. I've always taken it from the heritage point of view, but seeing other people's perspectives of that is very interesting. So how can people help you currently?
So, send us your maps. It's not about being an artist. I mean, the ones that we saw are, if you have a look online, you'll see it can be a sketch map. It can be literally a few notes on a piece of paper. What's important is what you're sharing about your perspectives. And then, yeah, those 5 activities and getting on our mailing list, just so you can feel around and wait for an event. If they're not your kind of thing, then we're going to do lots of different types of events. So an event will come up that piques your interest, and then come along and give it a go. Come and be participants.
Explore the website.
I'll be coming across as soon as I'm allowed out of isolation. So yeah, I suppose big thank you to yourselves, Anne-Marie, and thank you, Tom, for joining in. Apologies for my internet going. I have a lot more questions for you, but I can't risk it at this point. Big thank you to all the people that attended. Do remember to register for the next webinar, which is currently live on our website as of 1 minute ago. You should be able to register for that now. So without further ado, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.